Which of the following functionalities does your automation framework or tool support to ease the creation, documentation, and maintenance of your test cases? Well, there are several automation techniques that can help reduce the efforts of creating and maintaining your automation. When selecting which automation tools to use, look for the following features, either built-in or with the ability to add on. Okay, so we have data-driven, object and model-based, keyword and reusable functions, and business-readable tests. Let's start with data-driven. So this technique separates the test data from the test logic. Okay, so it removes the need to hard code your test data inside your test case. For example, your test may read the username and password from a database instead of hard coding the values into the test cases. Doing this makes it easier to update your tests by just updating your test data. This also allows you to drive different test scenarios by simply changing or adding an additional dataset. For example, if you want to test different login credentials for users with different roles, you can simply add the values into the database instead of creating multiple test cases that differ only in the credentials. Next, object and model-based. This technique separates the technical identification of the UI element from the test logic. If you think about how a user interacts with a UI application, the user first identifies the elements that they want to interact with. Okay, so for example, a text input box for entering your username and password, and then the login button to be clicked. Then the user acts upon these elements by entering their data and clicking a button. So test automation tools follow the same process. The tool first needs to know which element to interact with before it can act upon the element. By extracting the object into a repository, this object can then be reused in multiple tests. If the object changes in, say, location or form, then the tester would only need to update the object in the repository, and all the tests that utilize that object would not need to be updated. Next, keyword and reusable functions. Okay, so this technique allows the tester to consolidate a set of steps into an object, usually called functions or keywords, that can be reused in different test cases. For example, many test cases may require the user to log into the system by entering the username, password, and then clicking on the login button. Grouping these different steps into one step called login would save a lot of work for tests that require logging into the system. If the login process changes, for example, there is a new checkbox to agree to some terms and conditions, then you can simply make one update to the login function and all the test cases that use this function will be updated. Finally, business-readable tests. Business-readable tests are tests that can be easily understood by a non-programmer. Okay? So code-based automation tools require the test automation to be created using a programming language. This is normally hard to understand unless the reader is versed in that programming language. There are frameworks like the Gherkin language and tools like Tricentis Tosca that can help build automation using the common language. This reduces the need for additional documentation to explain what the test is doing, and this additional documentation can easily get out of sync with the code. Business-readable tests also make it easy to understand where the errors are when the test fails, speeding up the debugging of code and maintenance of test cases.